President Trump is making a new expletive-laden threat against Iran after Iranian forces conducted what CENTCOM called a surprise attack on the U.S. military. CENTCOM didn't specify the location here, but U.S. ally Jordan said it intercepted 5 missiles from Iran. President Trump told Fox this morning, quote, "We are going to beat the effing S-word out of them. We'll be hitting them hard. They're going to get a beating." And this threat that you heard from Trump today, he does frequently make threats. This one had more expletives, but he makes threats like this all the time, doesn't always back them up. Do these threats work?
Well, they haven't worked to date. And even if he follows through this time, it's not necessarily clear that the Iranians are going to change their strategy. Their long-term goal is to control the Strait of Hormuz. That gives them leverage over the world economy, over the United States, and allows them to charge tolls for shipping and rebuild their military forces and their economy. And they're not going to give that up lightly. So even if the United States were to return to full-scale combat operations and even expand the targets set, as the president has indicated, to hit infrastructure and bridges, not sure that the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps is going to give in. It appears that it's in this war for the long haul.
For a few days there, we did see relative calm in the region until last night when the U.S. military said it intercepted this surprise attack. And CENTCOM said that Saudi Arabian forces joined with U.S. forces to strike the Iran-allied PMF group in Iraq. I mean, first off, can you just talk to us about the implication of this joint U.S.-Saudi strike?
Yeah, so 2 different things are going on here. The 2 things are not conflated. The Iraqi militia groups, the Popular Mobilization Forces, some of them launched drone strikes against Saudi oil facilities. And in retaliation, the United States and Saudi Arabia hit targets in Iraq affiliated with the Popular Mobilization Forces. In a different strike, a segment of the Iranian government decided that it wanted to hit a U.S. base in the region, and it targeted a U.S. base in Jordan with 5 missiles, all of which were shot down. This probably was in an attempt to scupper the negotiations, because there are parts of the Iranian government that don't want to negotiate with the United States. And this, if you don't want to negotiate with the United States, this is the way to make sure the negotiations fail. So these are 2 different things, but having the Saudis involved, at least in protecting their own infrastructure against attacks, is an escalation of this conflict of a sort.
And then just yesterday, Israel's defense minister said that the U.S. had been preventing Israel from striking Iranian energy infrastructure because of economic and energy concerns. Sort of squaring that with what you're hearing from Trump, how do you see the Pentagon threading the needle on its military strategy of striking Iran?
Well, in this latest round of strikes, we've focused on targets near the Strait of Hormuz, targets that are affiliated with Iran's ability to interdict shipping in the strait. If the president expands this target set to include roads, bridges, power plants, as he's indicated, then there's really no reason not to allow Israel to pitch in. But this has the downside of Iranian retaliation against oil facilities and oil targets in the Gulf region, which would obviously have a major impact on the world economy. So this is, a trade-off that the president is going to have to consider, and one that I think he's wrestling with right now.
How are these renewed U.S. strikes fitting into this overall picture right now? CENTCOM, the Central Command, is not saying it's a full return to war, but what's your take?
So, Wolf, I believe that most of these strikes are still continuing the pattern of taking out Iranian military capabilities, especially those associated with the ability to interdict shipping in the Strait of Hormuz or in the Gulf. And so those are very, very appropriate targets. The problem with it is that it's on and off. And so if you really want to take out these targets, you have to have continuous strikes on them. You have to hit them so they can't rebuild, can't put another system in place and whatever. And we learned in Vietnam, and I'm going back now to the 1960s, when I was a cadet at West Point and a junior officer, that when you're going to do an air campaign, if you start it, you need to finish it. You don't want to end up in a case where you stop it, say, hey, can we have a talk? Can we have a talk? Because they rebuild and take advantage of it. When we did this to the North Vietnamese in the 1960s, they just thought our air campaign was ineffective. It didn't really change the outcome. We hit a few targets. They say, oh, gee, that's bad. We didn't want to lose that warehouse, but then they make it up. The other thing, Wolf, here is that China and Russia are actively supporting Iran. And so we're not going to make headway in negotiations or in really eliminating their capacities unless we stop that reinforcement coming in. Now, what's public is the 400 Chinese surface-to-air handheld missile launches. But there's a lot more than that coming in, not only targeting information, but drone motors and rocket fuel, and there's no telling what. If you're going to win a campaign like this militarily, you've got to seal the borders of Iran, not just put a blockade around the seashore about oil. It's about military support and hardware. And this also is what happened to us in Vietnam in the 1960s and early 70s. We didn't want to pay the price of talking to Russia and China and being strong. So, we let our troops suffer. And in this case, this campaign's dragging on and will continue to drag on until we isolate Iran. You have to isolate the theater of operations.
Egypt now says a drone struck one of its energy facilities yesterday. No party has claimed responsibility for this incident, but do you see this as a potential widening of this conflict with more countries being pulled in? Because the suspicion is Iran launched this drone to target this place in Egypt.
Yes, and what I was reading online is it probably came from Hezbollah. But the point is that, yes, Iran is going after horizontal escalation because that's the way they're dealing with the threat of the military strikes. They want to make it so uncomfortable for the neighboring countries that they won't host American forces there. It's a form of pushing us back, keeping us away. And of course, the further our aircraft are based away from Iran, the more difficult it is to maintain continuous air campaign over them. So it's a military strategy. It's also a political strategy.
Would Hezbollah, an Iranian terrorist proxy group, launch a strike against this target in Egypt without getting permission from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran?
Absolutely not. In fact, as we understand it, the IRGC is now in charge of Hezbollah. The Israelis were very effective in taking out a lot of the top leadership, so I think Iran has just put its own officers in there to keep it going. It is an arm of the IRGC now. It has to be looked at as that.
Egypt now pulled into this after this port drone attack. Saudi Arabia joined the U.S. for strikes on an Iranian-linked militia group in Iraq. You have the Houthis in Yemen stymieing transit in the Red Sea as the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. How big is this getting?
Bigger and bigger, and it's moving almost inexorably toward the west. Think a Western front. We talked about that in World War II. Here it is, the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, owned and operated by Egypt, strikes on Jordan. And the Iranians are also threatening NATO partners, saying, whatever you do, NATO partners, don't allow your bases to be used for strikes against us. So we're seeing a kind of inexorable movement to the west here, Brianna, and it's very worrisome. Here's the play. The Iranians are pulling in as many of the Arab states as they can, hoping that they, the Arab states, will turn around, put pressure on the U.S. to pull out. I think it's going to backfire on them. And I'll close with this. I am seeing pretty credible reporting that the Saudis are trying to put together a coalition of Arab states in order to push back on this Red Sea challenge they're facing. So I don't think this is going to work for Iran, but that's the game they're playing.
And you also are looking at Iran reiterating the Strait of Hormuz is going to remain closed. You have 14 mostly regional countries backing that maritime defense alliance that's supposed to protect the shipping routes, the global trade. What does the future of global shipping through all of these regional waterways look like in your view?
You've put your finger on why all this matters beyond the pretty obvious day-to-day impact on the global economy of shutting down a major strait. Why it really matters is, broadly speaking, are we going to preserve freedom of the high seas? Are we going to preserve transit rights through straits around the world? Are we going to protect our Suez Canal, Panama Canal, and other areas of the oceans that are so crucial to trade? So I think, again, you're going to see Iran's efforts here backfire. It'll lead to the coalition that you and I just talked about of Arab states. But what I'm hoping for, Brianna, is the Europeans, who after the United States and perhaps China had the third most powerful combination of warships. Will the Europeans come into this alongside the U.S. to reopen this strait? I'm hoping that is what happens. And that would be, in that case, a real strategic mistake by the Iranians to broaden this conflict.
And speaking of Europe, Iran's foreign minister actually warned two European countries, Cyprus and Bulgaria, against allowing the U.S. military to use their bases. How much ability does Iran have to back up those kind of warnings?
Limited, but not completely benign, meaning if you look at the ranges of their maximalist ballistic missiles, in theory, they could reach all the way to Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, or into the Eastern Mediterranean, where the nation of Cyprus, not a NATO member, by the way, but a European Union member, sits. So again, Iran is pushing at the Arab world to the west. Now we're seeing them push toward the European world even further. Ultimately, I think this will backfire on the mullahs in Tehran. I hope it does.
Today, China's foreign minister dismissed reports from Reuters that Beijing is sending 300 to 400 shoulder-fired air defense missile launchers to Iran. That's according to the country's state-run news agency. U.S. intel had indicated that China was preparing to deliver new air defense systems to Iran. So I think that there was this expectation of that. That's what CNN's reporting has been. What kind of concerns does this raise for you? What does this look like?
It's not just the package of potential shoulder-fired missiles, whether that's a good piece of intel or less assured. But what it ought to worry all of us is if China is going to line up alongside Iran to the degree of providing military-grade hardware or even, Brianna, components that go into it, that's extremely worrisome because it gives Tehran a lifeline. It's the phone a friend concept. Tehran worked closely with Russia. If Beijing starts to step in alongside Russia, supporting Tehran, we'll have a bigger problem that could, final thought, bleed over into the Pacific as well.
Your meticulous tracking of the stockpile is something that so many, in journalism, in media, and beyond, has been relying on to really understand the state of affairs, these levels, how depleted the stockpile appears to be. Give me some perspective on this from your view. What does this mean for the U.S. military?
Sure. First, I'll say that we went through the numbers very carefully, what was publicly published, and then calculations. So we believe that these numbers are close enough that decision makers can use them for making decisions. Here, with the missile defense inventories, of course, they are greatly depleted, and that's been driven by the Iranian attacks on U.S. bases and our allies and partners in the region. The longer the war goes on, the more of these systems we're going to be using. We also looked at ground attack munitions. Some of those have been greatly reduced also.
The president was asked about this because it's really become a really central focus in the past week, as the reporting was that there was concern over the stockpile, and that was driving some of his decision making on whether to escalate or not with the Iran war. The president was asked about the stockpile, and his view was, the way he talked about it with reporters is, he said it was in very good shape. And he told reporters this: we have a lot of the mid-level stuff, but would like to have more of the sophisticated stuff. Is that accurate in that description?
Well, it is accurate in the sense that these are the sophisticated missiles that can handle Iranian missile attacks, or missile attacks by Russia against Ukraine, for example. We do have more of short range and medium range munitions, ground attack munitions. The problem with those is that platforms like aircraft have to get much closer to the target. That makes them much more vulnerable. Losses will go up, and that's why we've used so many of the longer range ground attack missiles.
One of the big things, as you're talking about, as the war drags on, then becomes how quickly can these this inventory, especially with these sophisticated defense systems, how quickly they can be replenished and built back up. What's the kind of general understanding of that, and how quickly these stockpiles could get back to their, original levels, if you will?
It's going to take about 3 years for the Patriots to get back at their original level, and of course, many analysts believe that was not high enough, that we needed more for a conflict in the Western Pacific, for example. The Pentagon has been putting a lot of money against these requirements. That began in the Biden administration. It accelerated with the reconciliation bill under the Trump administration, and will get even larger if the 2027 budget is passed. But it takes time. Right now, the missiles that are being delivered were funded in 23 and 2024. If you bought one today, it would take probably 3 to 4 years for that missile to arrive. So the problem now isn't money, it's time.